Hello and welcome to another edition of the Last Man Standing podcast. Yes, I'm your host, Ben Standing, and I cover the Washington Commanders for The Athletic. It's Tuesday afternoon here in the DMV. Hope everyone is doing well with cooler temperatures out there. So, hope everybody's enjoying that. I was out in Ashburn today for training camp. So, yes, I was enjoying the cooler temperatures, relatively speaking, compared to what's been going on here. And an interesting day out in the Commander's Land, not because today was a day with pads on, though that's always, a notable story, but it's about the fact that they signed wide receiver Martavis Bryant. Now, that's very interesting because on paper, this is a 6'4" receiver who had 14 touchdowns in his first two seasons in the league, and the Commanders could use some size. He also has not played in the NFL since 2018 and has had quite the journey to get even to this point. So it's an intriguing signing, but it comes at a point where there's a lot more uncertainty with the rotation and the potential composition of this receiver room. So I'm going to dive into all this here, along with some injury updates, some other notes from camp as Washington is getting ready for the joint practice on Thursday and the game on Friday against the Miami Dolphins in South Florida. So we'll get to all that in a moment here on the Last Man Standing podcast. Yes, you've heard me talk about this, and I'm so pumped that so many of you have already gotten on board with signing up for the new feed, but I want to emphasize that to those of you who haven't gotten there yet. It is a new feed, Last Man Standing, for the next couple weeks. We'll still be double dipping here on the podcast feeds. The standing room only is being updated through the final preseason game, but then after that, it goes away and everything is over at the Last Man Standing podcast, which of course you can find, the line anywhere you can do your podcasting. So it's been great to see how many people have already migrated over. I just want to keep emphasizing it to make sure we don't lose anybody along the way. I know people have been on vacation or so on. But yeah, it's a big move. I'm excited for it, but I want everybody to make sure that you're aware of it. So again, Last Man Standing. You can find it at iTunes and so on. Hit the subscribe button. Auto download if you feel like it. And if you got an extra second to drop a rating and a review, so many of you have been kind enough to do so already. All helps, makes us all feel better. We can sleep better at night knowing the audience is coming over with us. And so far, it's been a really great response. All right, so I want to get to a few things today here on the podcast. I want to start with the wide receiver room. Now, as I mentioned, Martavis Bryant, the Commander, signed today. He was at practice today. He was out there with the team using his big 6'4" frame on some blocks and so on. Now, for those of you who just aren't sure who this is and why I'm talking about some guy that they signed in mid-August and you've never heard of him in your fantasy drafts, well, you would have heard of him in your fantasy drafts back when he entered the league in like 2014, 15, that era. He had 14 touchdowns in his first two seasons with the Steelers. He was a fantasy football crush for me, I will admit, back at that point, because he had the tantalizing combination of size, speed, and just seemed to be, had that playmaker vibe. He also had some issues off the field, was suspended for the 2016 season because of a violation of the league's substance abuse policy. Played the next 2 years, then was suspended again for indefinitely because of another violation. He's been out of the NFL since then. He's tried to catch on with the CFL. That didn't go anywhere. He played recently in the XFL, was with the Dallas Cowboys practice squad last year, but never came on board. He worked out with the Commanders, or at least met with the Commanders back in the spring, came in today, and here he is on the roster. As we have discussed many times, the Commanders receiver room is lacking in one specific skill set, and that, or trait, maybe athletic trait, maybe in that size. Terry McClaren, Jahan Dotson, De'Ami Brown, those guys are all in the 6 foot range. Olamide Zaccheaus is smaller than that. De'Ami Brown fits in there. Luke McCaffrey's like a smidge taller, but only that. So this would be an acknowledgement of size. And when this move came down, like literally we're talking to Dan Quinn this morning. Dan Quinn got out there a little bit later than he normally does, and that may have factored into the timing here because the team sent out a email or sent out a tweet, whatever, announcing the moves. Martavis Bryant in. They released Ramed Ahmed, one of their two kickers. It's now only Patterson is here. They're still looking for kickers, just to be clear, but they want to give one kicker more reps, consistent reps. Patterson gets that job for now, but we'll see what happens going forward. In any event, so hey, Dan Quinn, could you tell us about why'd you do this? He said, of course, he knows Bryant from his time with Dallas. The Bryant, has been in the league and had success. And he, from seeing him in practice last year, felt, hey, this was a guy that we had to, pay attention to. He was a guy that they would use in practice to simulate either an opponent's speed or size and so on. He also said that, hey, yeah, we're looking for more size in the room. The reason we've talked a lot about Bryson Tremaine this offseason is because not only has he been making catches down the field, but at 6'4", he gives you that size. What Tremaine doesn't have is speed, not to mention experience. He's yet to play in the league. Bryant is, so Bryant was entered the NFL. Oh, sorry. Bryant last entered the NFL. He last played in the NFL. I'll get that right one day. He last played in the NFL when Tremaine was still in high school. He entered he last played in the league when before Terry McClaren was even drafted. So he's got experience. I think he's like 32, but he also hasn't played, and that is sort of a crazy uh, scenario that just is somebody who has not played since 2018, who isn't Jerry Rice, who isn't Randy Moss, who isn't somebody that's been a proven talent, but he was pretty explosive back then. He looked to be in good shape from what I can tell. Terry McLaurin said as much today, and obviously the team signed him. So it'll be very interesting to see what they get out of him. I'm not expecting a ton. That's just me being conservative because, again, hasn't been in the league for 6 years. But that said, it's notable that they did do this because of the lack of size, but also there's right now a bit of upheaval, it feels like, in the receiver room. I believe we talked about this on this pod last time. I've now subsequently talked about it several times on Kevin Sheehan's radio show and podcast and uh, chatting with Lenny about this, all that stuff, that it was very, very bizarre to see that Jahan Dotson played 32 snaps in the opening game. 32 snaps. It's not the number. He had more snaps than any receiver on the roster. That is bizarre for a guy that we're assuming is starting. Terry McLaurin, for example, only went 11 snaps. Almost all of the starters that we would say are the obvious starters, your Brian Robinson, Sam Cosmi, obviously Jaden Daniels, guys like that, they were all out after that first series, more or less. I think Tyler Biadasz stayed the next rep to work with Marcus Mariota. But other than that, like all these guys were out, but not Dotson. He kept going. He was there with Jeff Driscoll, the third quarterback, still in the game. So that is pretty notable. And it's not like Dotson's coming off an injury and therefore needed some work for conditioning or so on. And when I asked Dan Quinn about this on Monday, the next time we had a chance to talk to him, I said, hey, could you explain what's going on here? And he didn't say, hey, we love Jahan. Things are going great. We just, wanted to get him a little more experience in Cliff Kingsbury's offense or whatever. He didn't say that. What he said was there's competition going on. At competition, they want to see everybody at all the different spots, and they want to see Jahan at all these different spots. Okay, sure, but that's also why you practice. That's why you have these joint practices. The game itself seems like something else is going on. I saw a quote today, I think from Gerard Mayo, the Patriots head coach, where he basically told his players going into a joint practice today that if you're a veteran and you get into a fight, you're going to play the entire game. Okay. And if you're not a veteran or you're not a starter, you're not going to play at all. But the idea that you would punish your starters by playing the whole game is why this is notable. I'm not saying it was punishment, but I am saying it's out of character, especially in the first game, to play a guy like Jahan that long. On top of that, Zacchaeus has been, I think, pretty sharp in camp. De'Ami Brown has gotten a lot of mentions by Dan Quinn. He obviously caught the 42-yard pass from Jaden Daniels in the preseason opener. Luke McCaffrey's been, quietish. I'm not saying he's had a poor camp, and he did have a couple catches today, but just, I wouldn't say Luke McCaffrey is going to be plug and play into the starting lineup at this point. And like I said, Bryson Tremaine has done some good things, but I don't know what they think about his speed, and does it, do they want to keep him? He was an undrafted free agent. He's looked good, but we'll see. Uh, Mitchell Tinsley, sort of the same, et cetera. So when you bring in a guy like Bryant, and they worked out, I believe, some other receivers. I don't know who they are, but I believe it was a group workout. Um, Again, it shows they are looking for that specific position. So I just find it pretty interesting that they bring Bryant in right after this stuff happened with Dotson. Now, if you made me set odds as to will Jahan Dotson be part of the starting lineup, I mean, I guess I would have to say yes, but you can hear the hesitancy in my voice. I think there's at least a world where that's not the case because, sure, not putting Bryant or Tremaine aside, you've got Terry McClaren, who's just a dynamic all-around receiver. But with him, you would have hypothetically De'Ami Brown as your speed threat. Again, hear me out. De'Ami's have been very good in the training camps, hasn't produced in the actual games. And then Zaccheaus, he's coming off a 10 catch season with the Eagles. He told me, though, that he actually, like, basically, look, he knew going into Philly it would be a tough situation because they have a lot of depth. He didn't think it would be that challenging to get opportunities, but he had a 40 catch season the year before, and he chalked up this Philly year as a good experience for him, that he thinks he improved as a player and a teammate because of what he had to go through. And like I said, he has looked pretty sharp so far in camp. Dan Quinn had him in Atlanta, so he knows him. And I think it's not just that the receiving ability, but he also knows the person, the guy who will do what the coaches kind of say, right? He also was the one who was returning punts. The first two punts against the Jets weren't the cleanest, but nonetheless, he was given that opportunity. Whereas, go back to Jahan, uh, you know, look, you've heard me say this. He's been kind of off. It has felt this summer, going back to the OTAs. He obviously came off a down year. There was a lack of confidence, it felt like, looking at it from the outside. I haven't heard him say that exactly, but clearly he has seemed a bit off. In the first week or so of camp, he really wasn't, just didn't seem to be the guy that we've seen in the past with the consistency in terms of route running and catching and things like that. But as camp progressed, and as more installs went in and the ball was going down the field more, it did seem like we were seeing the guy who we have witnessed be a really good route runner and so on. And he seemed to be getting more steadier there. But again, then he plays those snaps, all those snaps. And mind you, he had one bobble there. He fell down on a pass from Jeff Driscoll into the end zone in a one-on-one situation that, you can't tell because since he fell down, the ball landed innocently in the end zone, but it did seem like there was an opportunity to catch to make a play in the end zone, and he fell down there. So there's a lot going on with this room right now, and then I'm not even really getting into like who would be the full room. If we're assuming that Dotson, Zaccheaus, De'Ami, and Luke McCaffrey with Terry are sort of the top five, if there's room for one more, a lot's going to come down to how they view the returner game. If Zaccheaus can do that as the punt returner, then you don't have to keep a Jamison Crowder. The kick returner argument would probably be the same. Is Noah Igbenogany possibly the guy, or maybe Austin Eckler is part of that team? If that's the case, then you don't have to keep a Byron Pringle or a Casimir Allen. And Dan Quinn cited Allen previously, so that's a name to keep an eye on. But all of that is a factor in possibly opening up a six receiver spot. Again, possibly it's somebody for size, and now possibly that's Martavis Bryant. A long way to go before though we see where he is at in this room. Can I have some fun? Will you allow me to have a little bit of fun here? I want to do a fake trade just for fun. I'm not reporting this. This is just me having fun. We've talked a lot about Brandon Ayuk, right? That the San Francisco 49ers They're not like desperately trying to trade him, but clearly they are at least more open to it now based on the way we've heard the rumors of possibly making a deal with the Steelers or the Browns or somebody else. The Patriots have pulled themselves out. I have not bought Washington at all in this recent iteration. We get the Jaden Daniels and Adam Peters aspects, but I haven't sensed any Washington is remotely involved with Ayuk. Nobody else has been reporting that either, and I'm not doing that here. But one thing I've heard when talking to other teams is, okay, the reasoning why they wouldn't trade Ayuk is because, well, then they need a little bit of a hole at receiver. So what would they do there? They got to figure out maybe another receiver. Okay, well, I don't know who the reports right before I started talking here. Ian Rappaport had a report that the parameters of a deal with the Steelers are set, and the Pittsburgh is going to give Ayuk a contract that would work. The question is, does San Fran want to actually do this? Well, they don't have to get a receiver back from Pittsburgh. Perhaps they can get it from somebody else. Okay. Well, for the same some of the same reasons, like we're going to frequently connect Washington to anything that's happening with San Francisco is because of the Adam Peters relationship, having just left that organization. So if Adam Peters, if San Fran's saying, "Hey, we need another receiver. Do you have something?" and he goes, "Well, we're not sure where we are with Jahan Dotson right now, right? We like him, but we're not sure, and perhaps this would be a way for Washington to sort of move on from something that it appears are not that positive what they want to do. That they're maybe not be all in on Dotson. This would get them likely a draft pick or two for next year, which I've said to you before. 2025 is when I see Adam Peters being bolder in free agency and perhaps the draft. That would go well if they don't, again, view Dotson as a definitive starter. And, you could get some draft capital out of him. And by the way, one logical reason why maybe he played 32 snaps was frankly to show him to the rest of the league. Hey, he's not hurt. There's nothing wrong with him, but we're open. Again, everything I just said about that is pure speculation, but why can't I have fun? And also, it kind of would make some sense. I mean, granted, if we're saying why would Washington not be in love with Dotson, but San Fran would, well, again, it's a different deal. San Fran only, they just need some pieces around Brock Purdy and George Kittle and Debo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey. Not saying that that's not the case here with Dotson, but it's a different vibe when you're a first round pick. So again, it's not reporting all that stuff, but it's interesting. Just a lot of things happening here simultaneously. That he plays a lot in this preseason game, in which it seems very odd that he did. They bring in Martavis Bryant, who I'm not saying would be a 1-for-1 replacement, but I am saying, you know, possibly more depth, worth a shot to see what they have. And, obviously Adam Peters has ties to San Fran. And talking, with some people around the league, I think if people thought this would be at least a reasonable idea, that this isn't, Ben stop sniffing glue kind of scenario, right? So just fun thought there, but it's a very interesting receiver room all of a sudden right now with this group. Okay, let's go to a couple other things here before we close up ahead of the Miami game. On the offensive line, obviously a very important group that was missing their top three tackles against the Jets. Today at practice, which was with pads, Cornelius Lucas and Andrew Riley were out there at the starting tackles. Wiley, of course, has missed most of camp with some sort of tightness, but he was back out there uh, today. And Brandon Coleman is still out. I'm guessing he's probably not going to be available against the Dolphins with this strained shoulder and pec. So we'll see where that goes. And look, again, not saying that Lucas and um, Wiley or Jacoby and Lachey, but I am saying these are guys who played in the league. They're solid. They're competent. They can feel like, okay, we can, however long we want to play Jaden Daniels in this preseason game, we can do it now with these guys. So that to me would be notable. And like to that point, I think when Dan Quinn talked about the Top Gun, made the Top Gun reference to Jaden switching out of the screen pass that was called to throw a ball down the field. I think in part it was because they were like, hey, we don't want to mess with his health, knowing the line play, that it was probably more of a quick pass that was, well, they said it was a screen pass that was going to get thrown. So I think the full playbook would be open with Lucas and Wiley. So this is good news if they are able to go in the joint practice and then specifically for the game. So something to keep in mind there. We will see what happens. By the way, I forgot to say, I did a new 53 player projection for Monday. So you can go check that out on The Athletic. And I went through a bunch of these spots. Now, that said, I did this before some of these injuries. There was also Sam Hartman. He's out at least this week, according to Dan Quinn, with a shoulder issue. The quarterback having any kind of injury in training camp, the rookie quarterback, makes it pretty easy for the team to say, yep, we're just going to put him on IR and call it a day. We'll see if they do that with Hartman. This way they would have him around without risking losing him if they were to try to get him on the practice squad or having to take up a roster spot for an undrafted free agent quarterback that they clearly like. But, if he's a deep cut third string and they would maybe bring in a veteran to play over him should it come down to that anyway, this would be a good way to stash him, but with an actual injury. Not suggesting there's any chicanery going on. So we'll see what happens on that front. Now, the other injury of note, Jordan McGee, the rookie linebacker at Temple, who has been turning heads throughout the spring and summer. At first, when I saw he only had 6 snaps in the first game, I thought, wow, they really, really like him. They don't want to risk him at all. But turns out he has this knee injury. They're saying he's out at least this week. I can't speculate beyond that. But, if an MRI or subsequent testing, once the swelling reduces so they can take a good test, shows more, then obviously he could be out for some time. So that would be a tough break. But hopefully that it's not a serious issue. We'll see eventually. If he were to miss time, that could be notable for Jamin Davis in terms of sticking around. I mean, Davis is still focusing more on the edge, but I asked him the other day, and he is still keeping up on his linebacker homework as well. So that might be a way to keep Jamin Davis on the roster. Mikhail Walker, one of the random guys that they added this year who's got versatility at both linebacker, has played some slot corner, etc. I think he's a guy to keep an eye on as well, whether it's as a fifth linebacker or possibly somebody to step in if McGee is out. So that's a couple of things on that front. What else can I tell you? Michael Wiley, one of the undrafted free agent running backs, he led the team in rushing against the Jets playing in the second half. Dan Quinn, when he was asked the other day about who are some players that stood out that are sort of like lower on the depth chart, Michael Wiley was one of them. Quinn said he had been kind of waiting for him to have some breakout runs. That happened in this game, and I have liked Wiley's skill set. He's got some speed, some playmaking ability. The only question for me really is undrafted, running backs are kind of a dime a dozen to an extent. You could probably get him through to the practice squad, and I don't know that they would use a 53 player spot on him. I have been hesitant to include Jeremy McNichols because, older running back, I always don't like using the term jag that often because, that sounds worse than just a guy, or just a guy sounds a little too insulting, I guess. But that's kind of who McNichols is. He hasn't played an offensive snap or hasn't gotten an offensive touch in 2 years. And, it's not like he was doing a ton before that. So this, to me, if you keep McNichols, it is purely you want a veteran in the backfield should something go down, and Jaden Daniels is there. But if you're shooting for the upside, Michael Wiley is a name to keep an eye on. Same thing with safety Tyler Owens, another undrafted free agent. Washington gave him a pretty good signing bonus, and he has been a constant presence around the ball in camp. Dan Quinn also cited Owens the other day, specifically on special teams. That works too. If you're looking at him just as a safety, though, it feels like they've got a lot of guys ahead of him. beyond the sort of the obvious two starters, you got Derek Forrest, Percy Butler, Jeremy Reeves, Dominic Hampton, 6th round pick, who I think physically meets some of the measurables that this team likes. So we will see what happens there. But I think Tyler Owens is another name to definitely keep an eye on. Um, Lastly, just I feel like I have to talk about Jaden Daniels every time. You heard me talk about this the other day. I am not somebody who is, throws out praise, uh, glowing praise easily. Um, there's more, one play is certainly not going to be uh, provide us with answers as to what Jaden Daniels will be as a quarterback. But as I said, I think that his decision to check out of the screen pass and go to a longer play, I think says a lot about his confidence right now. And so many times we see quarterbacks, or really any athlete, get ruined, hurt, diminished, etc., because of that as much as anything else. Go back and watch Bull Durham and hear what the Kevin Costner character is telling the Tim Robbins character when Tim Robbins gets called up to the big leagues. You're going to get beat up. You're going to get knocked around. It's okay. Just stay confident. Stay confident. If you do that with the stuff he has, you'll be fine. And I think it's the same deal here with Daniels. The fact that he had the guts, the chutzpah, whatever, to make that choice. I know it seemed to playfully annoy Dan Quinn slightly, but again, I think it's as much about keeping Jaden healthy and staying with the plan that this coaching staff has carved out. But the results speak for itself, and I think it's a pretty significant moment for him. And I think he had another good day of practice today as well. Lastly, to get Bryant. Oh, did I already say this? I've lost track of what I'm talking about. But yeah, with Bryant coming in, they released one kicker. Quinn said, yeah, Riley Patterson will be the guy for now to get him extra reps. But I would still assume that the week one starter is likely on another team right now. At least Patterson, though, has kicked in the NFL, including just as recently as last year. And the wonder is, can he be consistent enough to maybe they can avoid having to try out other people down the line? But I would hardly say this is over, even though there's only one kicker in camp now. All right, so the Miami Dolphins up this week. I will be at the joint practice down in South Florida on Thursday. Make sure to follow me on Twitter, X at Ben Standig for those updates. You can, of course, read me in The Athletic, and I will be recording a podcast on the Last Man Standig feed. The Last Man Standig feed is the new feed for this podcast. The standing room only one is going away. Last Man Standing will be exactly that, the last feed standing after the preseason game. So again, I really appreciate everybody who's already migrated over and dropped a nice rating and a review. Look forward to continuing the momentum here in the days ahead. And there's also a YouTube channel. I haven't really mentioned that in part because I haven't really done anything with it yet. Everything here is a little bit of a work in progress. We're going through it, and Bram Weinstein has been, of course, big help getting me through this change. And the plan is to be, a steady presence on the YouTube circuit as well. So, but you can go there right now, and so you can subscribe to it, and it'll be ready for you when we get going. I think that's it. I think that's all I got for you right now. So that is it for now. Ben Standig signing off. Until next time. See you.